you. I haven't met either of you before.
Yeah, I haven't met you before. Hi.
Hello, hi.
Hi.
Sorry. On your doorbell. Yeah, I just updated my Zoom, and it's again everything is new now. Okay. Hi, Richard.
Hi,
Hi,
Eugene.
uh-huh. Hi, Jerry. Just a
And
sec.
Terry.
I need to say somebody's came. Just a second. Let me open the door. I will be right back. Sorry.
Terry, I know. Anna, whereabouts are you located?
I'm in Tennessee at the moment.
Nice.
Tennessee now, and Anna, where are you?
I'm in Philadelphia.
Okay, so
That's my old stomping ground. I grew up.
Oh, and where are you, Richard?
I'm in Ottawa, so we have at least three North American
Yeah.
people here. And Eugene, where are you from or
I'm
living?
in Philadelphia. I'm about, like, I don't know, 10, 15 blocks away from Anna.
Oh, okay.
So we're on the East Coast. And I'm sorry, I missed. Richard, you are from Ottawa, right?
From Ottawa.
I'm in Tennessee.
Tennessee. Okay, good.
Mhm.
Welcome and nice meeting you.
Nice meeting you. Yeah.
Yes, and I'm just thinking, should we wait a few minutes or should we start? I usually,
Well,
go ahead.
Are you running the event, Eugene, or is
I think so. At least I announced that. I'm not sure I will be running it, but at least I announced this event. It's interesting for me,
Mhm.
this topic, and I was thinking about that. So, uh, I just what I want to start with my sharing of my frustration about this
Mhm.
issue, and maybe we can just after that can have a discussion. But maybe before that we can maybe briefly introduce each other. But still, I'm thinking, should we wait maybe 2 more
Maybe,
minutes?
yeah, few minutes. Maybe
Yeah,
other people will come too, so we don't have to reintroduce ourselves.
right?
exactly.
Yeah.
On another
I,
hand, it will happen anyway. Some
Yeah.
people will come late.
I also may be called very shortly. I have some people working on my porch, and their boss is coming around this time, unfortunately. I may have to go and talk to him.
I also want
I
to say
had
that. Oh, go ahead,
I,
Richard.
I had the impression that Sifaan wanted to
Yeah.
join in on this as well.
Mhm,
Oh, you
mhm.
So
know
maybe
him. Uh-huh. That's
yes,
interesting.
Terry and I both know him.
Aha. Tell us how and why, because I think we know him as well.
Yeah.
So, but we probably know from different sides. So it's interesting how he united us, which is good for him. Uh-huh. So how do you know him?
Well, maybe Terry first. You've been working quite closely with him on the website, I think.
Oops,
You're muted.
yeah.
I don't know if he was at Arrow or if I just met him on the server, the Discord.
Uh-huh.
Yes, he was not at Arrow.
Yeah, so I think I met him after we were all together on the Discord.
Right. So there's been an effort over the past year to try to unite us globally in our concerns about advancing democratic education, to create a sustainable global action campaign to reach the general public with these ideas, not have them so well kept, so uninformed of these ideas. School boards tend not to like to promote any ideas that challenge their way of thinking, and so we have a general public that is very uninformed of the democratic approach to education, which for us who have delved into that, we feel that that's the way that children thrive, and that the accepted way of doing school is how children don't thrive. And so that has brought together people like Sifaan. I met Terry this past summer at the Aero conference. Are you familiar with Aero?
Yeah, I think we met him also. I was at least one day at Aero conference through the Zoom, and I think Sifaan was there like a host in front of the whole
He
event.
was at a previous one, like maybe last year.
Oh,
or the-
maybe
No,
that.
this is not how I met him.
No, we also, that's not how I met him first time, but I think I saw him, but first time we met him through something else, what we call the University of Students, that maybe we will talk more about later.
And are you familiar with IDEC?
Yes.
And so Sifaan and Henning Granner presented the IDEC 2023 resolution.
Ah,
And so that's been, I think, largely how I've become so involved with Sifaan. And we're working right now to, well, we have created events for the Learning Planet Festival. Are you familiar with it?
no.
No.
Oh, you know
The-
what? I think he sent me some information. Is it about some event will be at the end of January, right?
That's
Uh,
right.
Yeah, yeah. In this
Yes.
case, a little bit no. Okay, but go ahead, tell us about more because he just sent invitation for that.
January 24th is the International Day of the Child.
Mhm.
And so there's a lot happening around that time with respect to education. The Learning Planet Alliance runs the Learning Planet Festival around that time. It's a few days. This year it's January 22nd to 27th. And the history of it would be it got going around 2020. In 2021, UNESCO published its report, which is reimaging the future of education, in which it called for a global debate on education to grow the conversation, is I think some of the wording on that. And the Learning Planet Festival is supported by UNESCO. My take on it, without knowing the full history of it, is that it was created prior to the UNESCO report coming out. So 2020 for the Learning Planet Alliance and 2021 for the report. So the report was well underway at the time that the Learning Planet was created. And if you look at the Learning Planet Festival, what we see there is the structure that can support a global conversation. It has already acquired a very large number of corporate supporters or partners, lots of speakers. The way it organizes for events, there are 3 events that I've been involved in putting together for the festival this year. And there seems to be no censoring. We're able to talk as freely about the full democratic approach to education, full respect for student rights. And so there's some feeling out there that the core of UNESCO does not fully grasp the idea of democratic education and the amount of freedom that the students need to learn, but they don't seem to be trying to control the conversation. And so that gives us an opportunity to get in among those people that are really concerned about the future of education, to express our ideas and to have conversations there, which could gradually move the whole UNESCO way of thinking towards the democratic approach. And then we're making some real progress. So the Learning Planet Festival is that opportunity. And I'm encouraging as many people who I can to attend it in order for us who really believe in democratic education to have a presence there, to start being really visible, so that we're not just out in the wings and dismissed too easily. We're a presence that has to be dealt with, and the more of us that show up at the festival, the more likely we are to have some influence.
Thank you, Richard, for sharing that. And well, I think we should stop waiting and just start our work. And maybe we just quickly introduce each other. Like you can say whatever you want about yourself. And let me start. On my screen, its next one is Terry. Actually, Anna, but she's not right now available. So Terry, please. And then Richard, you, and then me, and whatever Anna will come, she will do that as well. So Terry, please tell us about yourself a little bit.
Are you talking to me?
Yep.
Okay. I started unschooling my children, doing self-directed learning in around 2011 because of just a horrendous amount of problems with them in the school system. And then as my oldest one moved into high school years and had high school friends, and we hosted exchange students every year. So we've hosted over the years 26 exchange students, and a number of them have been like regular school year exchange students, and they're required by law by the State Department to be in the public school system. Which is interesting because we homeschooled and then we had school kids in the program. But when my oldest hit the age to be in high school and we had exchange go into high school, there was a lot of like, expectations about what high school is and what high school could be and how cool it is. And so he wanted to go to high school. So I let him go to high school, and we talked about all the issues and what he's probably going to find there and how he's going to feel about it. And 2 weeks in, he was like, got to get me out of here. But we had made an agreement that if he took that plunge, that he would, finish out the semester. So basically that was hell for him. But in that process and having all these other teens going through high school, I got more and more involved with teens and issues around issues. Hey, there he is. Issues around teens and involving school and what it's doing to their morale and their self-esteem and like everything. And then I was also very, very involved in the homeschool community, and I started just doing a lot of programs for teens, field trips and homeschool programs and stuff. And then parents started asking me to homeschool their child. And I was in Virginia at the time, and it's illegal to homeschool somebody else's child. But it is not illegal to start a school and teach other people's children. So I started a farm-based, basically a project-based high school. And we got that up and running just as COVID hit. And in Virginia, it was a hard shutdown for a really long time. And then when they finally let us go back to school, it was with masks, and that was going to be really hard to do, the outdoor activities and stuff that the kids were interested in. And so it just killed us. So I and I've started a national virtual high school program that basically provides the scaffolding and mentoring and support and coaching for high school students that want to do self-directed learning, but want a little bit of support for it. So long story short, so I'm very, very into self-directed learning, which other places in the world are calling democratic education, I guess. So I have a real passion for teens and a real passion for learning in a more natural way. This school system sucks. It's killing our kids, literally.
Thank you. Okay, next person sounds like Richard, you.
So thanks for that segue, Terry. Our schools are killing our kids.
Yeah.
I have 40 years, maybe a year or two more than that, working in public education. And I believe in the institution as the way that it's the institution that, to me, that nations build their future. And so the future I would like to see built is based on democratic principles. So the idea of democratic schools is what I would like to see the public systems evolving towards. We right now have the divide that most of the democratic schools are operating outside the system. And the problem with that is they have to raise money privately to survive. And a lot of the private schools that I know that are based on democratic principles have a hard time surviving. And the people who start them often get consumed just running a business, a small business, as opposed to working with the children that motivated them to establish the school in the first place. And so I look at what are the possibilities for change. And given that the vast majority of students are in the public school system, the question becomes, how can we get the democratic principles more applied within public schools? The public schools tend to always gravitate back to what they most understand. So even if you can get a democratic program running within a secondary school or a public school, the chances of it lasting only a short time are very slim. And yet, if we can amount the pressure globally, the idea of establishing the idea of schools within schools, that we have two philosophies operating under the same roof, and there are ways to manage that they don't sabotage each other. To do that, then we have the funding problem looked after. Public education is funded. We're entitled to that funding. We don't find what public schools are currently providing is suitable for us. So establish another fundamentally different choice and let us access it right within our own communities, right within our community schools. And so the film Suvame, Pioneer of Possibility, which is going to be screened at the Learning Planet, is an example of how public school systems can start to provide real choice within their current schools. So the idea would be that we don't walk into our community school with some watered down idea of democratic education that is practiced for a short time during the week. We go in there and you can choose the two philosophies. You can stick with what you have, or you can choose the other. And so that's the orientation that I'm on and what I'm working at with the Learning Planet events. And then also what Sifaan has worked so hard at, the My Life, My Education, I guess we could say campaign or movement that is underway right now, and he can speak more to that.
Okay. No, thank you. I don't know, Sifaan, are you here, like with us? Can you hear us?
Yes, yes,
Okay.
yes. I'm traveling right
Please.
now on my phone, but I'm here.
Okay, can you introduce yourself? Although sounds like we the one person that we all know, it's you. So thanks for spreading the news about this podcast. So go ahead, Sifaan, please introduce yourself.
Okay, so my name is Sifaan Zavahir. I'm in Sri Lanka. 3 years ago, we started a small democratic school here called Keep the Republic. Through reaching out to other people in this space, I met yourself at this sort of University of Students movement, separately also Richard Attali and many others who we are working together with. So part of my interest in this and why I sort of invited other people also to join is this whole issue of compulsory education as a right and how it is understood and implemented. And partly that is also coming from an angle that many places where democratic education is happening, you use as a sort of position that we are an alternative to the public or conventional education system. And then there are, of course, many alternatives. But one of the things I think that really differentiates democratic education is recognizing the recipient, and especially children and young people, as complete human beings who are subjects of rights, who have rights, who are not just objects to be educated. And while that has been there in Kochak's orphanages, in Summerhill, in many places, until recently, I don't think the community has really engaged with the documents and conventions and bodies around human rights, like the Committee on the Rights of the Child and things like that. And then last year, in October at the IDEC conference, so I was one of the two people who were present there, adopted this resolution that we would write to the Committee on the Rights of the Child and say that, we look back at the Universal Declaration and this is what the people drafting it meant about compulsory education, but in many countries it is being understood as compulsory schooling, which is not what was intended, and this needs to be sorted out. And then since then I've been exploring more and more about human rights and education as a right and things, and I'm realizing that democratic education needs not take the soft position of being an alternative, but we can take the strong position as being education as a right, and in achieving that right, we have to respect all other rights, and the system of education that best does that is this democratic education. That's the session I've been speaking about on the International Day of Education on January 24th, as Richard was mentioning. So I think that's sort of my intro.
Thank you, Sifaan. Okay, let me introduce myself. Since Anna's look like it's not here yet. Let me introduce myself. My name is Eugene Matusov. I'm a professor of education at the University of Delaware. My primary focus, as a practitioner, let's say, is democratic education at the higher ed, at the universities and colleges, not with the little kids. Although I'm very much also interested in little kids because my students are primarily future teachers or educational researchers, as we're talking about graduates, doctoral students. So one of my interests in this issue of compulsory education as a human right, which is Article 26.1 is Universal Human Rights and Declaration of Universal Human Rights, attracted my attention because I started working on the book. Actually, I didn't realize that I'm working on the book until last year. So I realized that already 3 years I'm working on the book without knowing that I'm working on the book. Sometimes that's happened. And the book is about post-enlightenment education. I think the biggest issue that we are, in my view, that's the big argument, that we kind of trapped by this notion of enlightenment. And I think that's a case that, and historically, by the way, the person who first, in my view, articulated a compulsory education as human right was Immanuel Kant. And his argument is very interesting. If we want, we can go in that. But let me say what puzzled me in this Declaration of Human Rights in Article 26.1, and that compulsory education for elementary school children. It's strange because rights, it's about freedoms of people. This particular statement is a statement coming from paternalism, and paternalism is a limitation of somebody's freedom for their own good. That's kind of definition of paternalism. And this is interesting, that right to be limited in your own rights, considered to be your right. and that's kind of attracted my attention. And I want to problematize that. Let me tell you now, provide arguments on another side, like why is that a limitation of somebody's rights can be, for some people, considered to be a right. There are several arguments I found about that. Okay, I'm just reading what Sifaan is saying. Yes. Thank you. Let me tell you that there are several arguments that people wait. One is biological argument. Humans born, unlike many other animals, most immature in a way, which means that after being born and for a long time, the young human being cannot survive without protection and paternalism of other more mature humans. And part of that, from kind of evolutionary point of view, this evolutionary psychologists argue that as part of that to allow us to mature within the culture. So we're biologically mature within particular human culture, and that's why human beings are born very immature from biological point of view. And in this case, this kind of paternalism required to be from evolutionary and biological needs. And that's why there is from that point of view, there is necessity to protect it legally through declarations like human rights. So being taken care of is a human right. And in this case, if you think about what does it mean take off, it means that somebody can make decision on your behalf while limiting your decisions, because you are immature. And so this is one argument. The second argument, which is kind of close, coming from Kant, actually, who pushed for these kind of things, to a big surprise, Kant's argument coming from notion of dignity. And this is Sifaan kind of connotates what you're saying, but not completely, I would say. Kant notion of dignity, he first started talking about human dignity as universal notion, but his universal notion was not conditional. For him, human dignity, first of all, is defined by autonomy. That's one, in my view, problematic statement, that human dignity is defined by autonomy. Second things, he grants human dignity only for mature, well-informed, well-intended, rational, and probably I missed something out of this triad. But you got the point. So those people, reasonable people who are well-intended, they should be granted full human dignity. Anybody else can have human dignity in potential. And so he said, well, because the other people are ignorant, immature, and so on and so forth, not well informed, we have rights to limit their freedom in order to make them mature and so on and so forth. So he, by the way, he very problematized. He knew that he created an interesting paradox that by limiting somebody's freedom, we give them freedom. And that limiting of freedom he called education. That education is about limiting other people's freedom to make them reasonable, informed, mature, and so on, so well-attended as well. And for that, we can limit them their freedom. So this is his student 50 make it even stronger, that statement that Kant did. He's claimed something like that. Compulsory is education. That's his formula, but coming from Kant. Meaning that limitation of other people's freedom for their good, it's legitimate, and this is part of education. Also, want to make very important. This is, by the way, he wrote, I highly recommend to read. It's only 6 pages. His almost like manifesto article, and it's called "What is Enlightenment?" And he basically said that all societal problems have two. I mean, yes, he has 2 kind of solutions. One solution is revolutionary. We can basically spread democracy. But the second one is what he called, it's kind of internal oppression that people experience. And this problem can be solved through the problem by the education. So education is viewed as instrumental things to solve societal problems. And that enlightenment credo, it's another part of entitled credo that I personally found very, very problematic. But it's highly penetrated us. And because it's penetrated, colonized us, that's very quickly this notion of compulsory education will emerge. So what I problematize, can paternalism be a right as a part of human right? Is by the way, paternalism is not necessarily only way to be compulsory. Like university education is not compulsory, but it's still imposed on the students. Like students usually do not choose what to study. Like I'm teaching at the university, I know that. Even when they say they have choice, it's questionable how much it's a choice, even when it is a choice. Because everything else is defined for the students. Like, for example, how many classes you should have. You need to have classes. You need, like, my students never choose me as their teacher because it's imposed by the university. They come to me not because they say, let me study from Eugene because I expect to learn something from. No, it's just like I become teacher because I was appointed by the institution. And all of these kind of things, it's in my view coming from this strong enlightenment. Now, the question that I have, whether or not paternalism can be right, can be a limitation of somebody's freedom, can be a freedom. The one thing. Another thing, can educational paternalism specifically can be a right or can be legitimate? And also, paternalism, in my view, it's an important part of, as again, biological important part of humanity. But for war, like, can it be also redefined? Like paternalism for what? It's so many other questions that I want just to bring. I don't want to talk too much about that. I just want to bring them. In my view, I've heard about approaches that I've heard, let's say, from Peter Gray. I don't know if you've heard about him. He's evolutionary psychologist who is become a proponent of and researcher of democratic education. He, for example, claims that we should redefine this compulsory education. In my view, no, we should not redefine. In my view, we should fight it rather than redefining that, because this is a really like an evil that creates all this problem that Terry you described. Because first of all, why does it make that? First of all, it makes education as primarily societal business. It's about improving society rather than personal business, about self-actualization, about finding who am I, and so on and so forth. It creates many other issues, like the fact that education can be designed by other people who never even saw the child, rather than, or student in a broader sense, rather than education coming from the students as what I call self-education, which for me is a broader sense than self-directed education. And so on and so forth. So this is what I would like to invite us to consider, the difficult issues that really attract other people. Like attract in a sense, some people are really attracted and believe in compulsory education as a right. And they think this is the right thing to impose education on other people. It both impose that they must have education, that's one thing, and many things, what they should learn, how they should learn, and so on and so forth. So I want to think that I want to just open our discussion. So whoever wants to talk, please feel free to start talking about it.
I guess Anna's back, Eugene.
Okay, yes, Anna, do you want to introduce quickly yourself?
Hi, I'm sorry to have missed probably all your, for sure, all your introductions and the beginning of Eugene's talk, but that was necessary. So I'm Anna Marjanovic-Shane. I'm originally from Yugoslavia, but came to United States to live a really long time ago, more than 40 years now. And yeah, live and work in Philadelphia. I'm very much interested in the dialogic and democratic education. And I'm also interested in play and early childhood education. As I'm also interested in, of course, education at all levels, but for different reasons, my career started with studying early childhood creative language metaphors in young children, and that included then studying play and everything. And so that stayed my long-time interest. So my newest project that I hope it will be a study of children's play, politics, and self-organization in play in a democratic school. So that's a little bit about me.
Thank you.
Eugene, you mentioned Peter Gray, and Terry and I got to spend some time with him at the Aero conference this summer, and so we're both pretty aware of what he's having to say, and that would tie into what you're looking at too, Anna.
Mm-hmm.
I put in chat, Eugene, as you were talking, two things. One is the planeticism. I can't say that. I'm so used to the word citizen, but it's a play on that, which is the university challenge of the learning planet. This is one of its projects to get young people, youth, which they would describe in this case university age, dreaming about the kind of education they would like to have. And that's what this event is about, and it will take you to other links related to that same thing. So I thought you might be interested in looking at that. One of the things that I've heard, I've been to a number of Aero conferences, and it seems that every time we're there are people who are there for the first time saying, I finally found my tribe. They have felt all alone in their thinking, or that there are too few people who think like them, and then they discover that there are a lot of people who think like them. And so the more we can come together, the more we can amplify our voices. And I think this I've got to learn to say plantism university challenge is the coming together of a group of people that way, and that the Learning Planet offers us a way to really start to come together in that way. At the bottom of the chat is how they describe it a little bit. It's these university age students pitching their dream learning programs for the university, and so that, as you were talking, I was thinking that that's what we need to hear, get the students involved that way. The other link is to Ecoversities. Are you familiar with it?
No.
They have a conference usually in the spring, and it's people dreaming about what university could be. So you might find that's worth looking into also.
Thank you. That's very helpful. Thank you, Richard.
Thank
So my kind of interest is how to address difficult questions that people on another side want. Like, for example, what would you say to a person that democratic education is nonsense because it's blind leads blind? Like ignorant person, like, for example, Terry, you talk about self-directed education, right? How can you self-directed if you're ignorant? Because you know that's one of the questions that very much leads to the notion of compulsory education. So if ignorant person cannot guide themselves, it means that somebody should do that, and somebody should impose that guidance, because they don't know where to go, how to go there. Even they don't know that they should even go or they must go. So for that, you need to bring coercion or manipulation. There could be, which is what progressive education usually stays for. How to manipulate somebody's consciousness to make them, to let them to the place where they're supposed to be, even without them even knowing that. This is Jean-Jacques, I almost quoting Jean-Jacques Rousseau, which is, in my view, father of progressive education. Which Kant also belonged to that. He was sympathetic to these ideas as well. So the question is how to address these difficult questions, in my view, because without addressing difficult questions, it's difficult to move forward. And all these questions should be addressed, in my view, rather than ignore or they say they're stupid or whatever.
Yeah, that's a good point. So one of the biggest arguments that I hear in promoting self-directed learning is, and I heard it when I finally let go and let my own, quite by accident, actually, it was a really long story how I got involved with it and let go of my, the trained ideas of curriculum and all that crap. My kids, quite by accident, because I had to be involved with a project and my dad was going to homeschool them for me, ended up doing self-directed learning. And at first I was terrified that they were going to be like behind, you know, all that programming we have, they're going to be behind, they're missing out, they're not going to have what they need, blah, 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 blah. But I was literally too busy to worry about it. So I thought, okay, I'll catch them up at some point, right? But what happened was when I stepped out of the picture, they started doing some really freaking cool things. At first, they did nothing. They burned up Netflix and anime and played Legos. And then they were doing really amazing things and they were asking questions and like studying languages and cultures and like all kinds of like, I was shocked. And so when I told other people about it, they're like, well, of course your kids would go all academic. I don't know what that means, but what I hear so much, like over the years, that was in 2011, and over the years, I hear it over and over, similar arguments. Well, if I don't tell my kids what to do, they're just gonna play video games and watch YouTube all day. And it's funny because that's how it starts, right? Because we have like an innate passion for learning, and we have to help people understand that a lot of times they're burning YouTube and playing video games all day to numb all the pressure and BS that's coming at them about education, right? So when they can let go and burn through it, then those little sparks happen of curiosity. And then it's a matter of fanning those flames, right? And providing opportunities for them to get to resources and mentors and find information. But a lot of times they find it themselves. It's a global world. Everything's connected, which is what makes school even more difficult for today's children, right? More depressing, more oppressive, because outside of school, they're connected to the entire world and any piece of information that they want. And inside of school, they're stuck trying to, being forced to learn something that's disconnected and out of context and isn't interesting. So it's completely a matter of like re-education, helping people understand that this is the way we learned for centuries, right? For millennia, as long as people have been around, this is how we learned. This whole idea of school and sitting at a desk and having crap dumped into your head and being tested for it is pretty new. And it's not working. It's like a huge social experiment that's failing in such a colossal way. So somehow we have to help parents help people let go of all that social training that we've gotten about school and what school is. And back in the day, it seemed legitimate. If we got that high school education and we went to college, we'd get a really good job. And now that's not true. So it's just a matter of letting go of all that programming and figuring out how to help people let go of that programming. That's our biggest challenge.
One thing that really helped me in this connection theory, reading some Actually, she's anthropologist of education. Her name is Jean Leif. She's sociocultural anthropologist of education. And by education, it means, in her view, she studied traditional education. She was anthropologist, not schooling, but traditional education, like weavers in many traditional societies, of looking at the different practices and how people learn. By the way, not necessarily children, it could be adults as well. And one of the important things that what I've learned, in my view, that was revolutionary for me, she said that there's kind of a paradigm, there's two paradigms is working. The paradigm that is coming from her notion of the education that it emerged, or learning, or view on learning, not on education so much, on learning, that emerged from studying traditional practices, that the occurrence of learning is non-problematic. Learning happens all the time, whether or not we want it or not. We're in the flow of learning. By the way, we may be not only humans, but even animals. We just not only pre-programmed to learning. We cannot get out of this. She make a very good examples of, including in schools. Learning all that happens all the time. Like, for example, she make, I remember that was interesting example she gave, math lesson. And she said, like, all students there learn. The question is, what problematic is? What they've learned. Some learn, let's say, how to add fractions, but others learn that math is boring. Others learn how to smuggle activities at that, or how to talk with the friends in math lessons, so the teacher will not notice that, and they will not get into trouble. And some learn how to dream, and so on and so forth. And she said, what's not learning, occurrence of learning is not problematic. The content of learning is problematic in the sense that people will learn different things from so-called the same events, which is never the same for them. And she said, in a traditional school kind of view, it's completely opposite. The content of the learning is not problematic because this is what taught to you, like adding fractions. The problematic is whether or not you've learned it or not. The occurrence of learning is problematic. And that's why there is testing. Testing, checking. Did you learn that or you didn't learn that? But what it is non-problematic because that's what designers decided. What she called it teaching curriculum. She separated learning curriculum and teaching curriculum. And she said learning curriculum always happen. The question is, what's the content of that? That's a different story. And so this idea that it's very interesting that there's two interesting things, what Terry, for me, you said. One interesting thing is that about this non-problematic occurrence of learning. Another that it's what you mentioned, it's a very interesting issue about almost existential and intrinsic drive for education. That's even stronger point and very interesting point. And which brings the question, what's the education is, how it's different from learning. And that's a very interesting topic as well.
Oh, you're muted.
Richard, you're muted. Please unmute yourself.
Right. I want to comment on the question that you posed a moment ago that Terry responded to about how do you convince people who think that if you don't tell children what to learn, force them to learn what you think they should know, that they won't learn what they need to know for life. And so I'm a good example of what we're up against with that. I started my teaching career in 1966, just to give you an idea of my age. And after 3 years, I read this book, Education and Ecstasy by George Leonard. I was really unhappy in teaching that first 3 years. I felt that what I was doing was or what I was required to do was not benefiting the children. And I was struggling with that because I come from a family of teachers. My father was successful within the old system. He didn't even question it. He was just a really nice, friendly personality who related well to kids, and he was a superintendent of schools at the time that I read this book. And the book described for me just so perfectly all of the discomfort that I felt with the existing system. It also includes a scenario of the kind of educational environment that students need. It was called the Kennedy School, this answer to what we needed to move towards. I read the Kennedy School scenario, and so I was familiar with what it was, but I didn't buy into it because it didn't answer that question. Would you learn what you had to know if you could just be free to learn whatever you wanted? And I was so schooled in the idea that no, if I didn't learn what adults told me to learn, I would never be successful. And I had become dependent on adults, reliant on them. And here I was a teacher still in that mindset. So the Kennedy School was not an answer for me. I gave the book to my father, as I said, a superintendent at that time. And I couldn't put the book down once I started reading it. It just resonated so clearly for me. Gave it to my father thinking that in his position, he could be a champion for change. And I was married at the time and away from home, so I'd just see him every week or two. And so a couple of weeks later, I'm visiting at his place, and he was uncomfortable, which was not his basic nature. And shortly after being there, I asked him if he had read the book, started reading the book. And it revealed why he was not happy. He said, I couldn't get past page 10 of that crap. And so it just offended him so much that all that he had stood for in life was being challenged here. He was being made to think that maybe what he had been doing was actually more harmful than helpful. Extremely painful situation. This good man who loved kids, doing what he thought was the best for them. That's what we're up against. And I said when he said he couldn't get past page 10, I said I'm surprised, because I just found that all of the criticism were so much on point to what I was experiencing. And he said, well, what's the alternative? And the alternative is sitting there in the book. And despite my frame of mind, I couldn't get my head around it. And it was actually years, probably a couple of decades, before I really grew towards what Peter Gray is saying and what the Sudbury Valley School stands for, the whole importance of non-coercive learning. But it wasn't until I ran a program in a high school that was largely democratic that I had the aha moment. And I had even been down to Sudbury Valley School for a week to observe what was going on there. A week doesn't do it. You have to have lived experience with it, where you see what the students are like when they come into the program, and see what they're like 6 weeks later, where they've come to life again. They're taking an interest in their education, and that experiencing them coming alive again is what really sells you, which is one of the reasons that I promote this idea of schools within schools. We've got to get them visible and accessible enough that people can have lived experience with that approach to learning. And then we start to sell them. Your question about how do we talk to these people who are stuck in this other way of thinking, that was me. And it took years. And it's in many ways a waste of time to even talk with them, because they're so stuck. They're not open-minded to seeing it a different way. And so it's better if we work towards getting examples of it, like Sifaan, Terry are doing, get out there and actually provide people with opportunities to experience this other way of learning, because until they do, they're not going to really appreciate it.
Thank you, Richard. For me, starting with the kind of last things that you said, I'm not interested so much convincing others. I'm more interested about convincing myself. In this case, I'm collecting the most interesting and difficult questions, and I'm trying to answer that honestly, and not with the thinking how I can get to that point of convincing, but really trying. Like, for example, you mentioned very interesting things. Often education is defined as preparation for the future. And from that point of view, how can, especially little kids, but not even little kids, ignorant people in general, how they know how to prepare to the future because they're ignorant and immature and so on and so forth. All this register of this the deficits that Kant brought to that.
Can I interrupt for a moment?
Sure.
Just to you say education for the future, and I feel that this is the trap that we're in, that it's always preparing for tomorrow. We need to be thinking about education for now. What excites us and empowers us for the life that we're in at this moment?
Richard, but this is I agree with you, but with one conditions, because in my view, in order to get to that, you need to exactly address why education for future is failing, because you cannot just jump on that because people say, well, what's now? It's in a way obstacle for the future. The kids, like Terry was telling, kids are playing or sitting on YouTube, playing games, doing all this nonsense that will fail them in the future. If they continue in that, it's a trap. It's imprison them. And if they do that, they will become ignorant and dependent and never become productive citizens and blah, 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 blah. You know that. I don't need to repeat that. So I think it's very important to get to that, to take this argument, their argument, really seriously rather than just dismiss that. Because if you start talking about, oh, we need to focus on what's now, they say, why? Now is the problem. Now we need to suppress now as much as possible, which they're doing rather successfully, unfortunately, in my view, suppressing now in the name of the future. And I think it's very important to really take seriously their argument about future. And in my view, I see a lot of flaws in that argument, which leads to even from their argument leads to the now rather than future. Because, okay, let's seriously consider how to prepare youngsters to the future, which is important because they need to be skillful, capable, and so on and so forth in the future. For me, the problem is, okay, let's take it seriously. Let's not dismiss that. Although my answer, like yours, will lead to dismissal of that question, but through the addressing it, not through saying that, okay, I know that it's very oppressive things. Yeah, I agree with you. But without addressing this concern, I don't think we will move forward. So my way of addressing this concern is saying one thing, that we increasingly don't know our future. In past, we try to approximate future based on the past. And it kind of was working in kind of way. The problem with this argument with the building approximation future based on the past, we know that it's not working because the society changes so fast and the changes are accelerated. It's almost. I was watching just one example. I was watching with my friend a movie that made in 2000s, and they say it's so unrealistic. I said, why unrealistic? Because they could have used their cellular phones to check something. And I said, remember, the cellular phones in the mid 2000s were not smartphones. And the person, oh, I forgot about that. Wow, it's such a different time. I couldn't even forgot how it was different. And acceleration going an absolutely unpredictable way. nobody knows. Like I remember, I was teaching basic in Soviet Union. You know that language, computer basic, because they thought you cannot use computers without knowing basics. You know that it was a computer language. For those of you who
I taught that, yes.
right, who cares about basics? Who even knows what it is? And this is the problem. So the question is, what does it mean to prepare for the future, which is unknown and cannot be taken out, approximate from the past? That's one problem. Another problem, which is
Eugene, can I cut in again here?
Yeah, sure.
I know that Terry left because it's 12. This hour has gone very fast. And I have to leave too, but I'd like to, I wish I had time to stay and get some views on Peter Gray's fundamental idea that if children are left to their own devices, they will, of their own volition, learn all that they need to know for life. We don't have to worry about them acquiring the skills to live a life that is consistent with their own inner being. If we just let them be, they need to figure out how to survive, and they'll do that of their own volition. I'm sorry I have to leave. Anna, can I hear just quickly before I go?
Yes, I would like to push a little bit back on that Peter Gray's thought, because if you just put some bunch of children on the island without any civilization, it will be very hard for them to survive and to learn everything. That's under the condition that they live in a certain kind of environment, social, technological, political, economical environment. People will learn a lot. But that's another side of having freedom. If that doesn't mean that you have the freedom to choose. It also means that you have a lot of a richness of that environment to experience or to be aware of the possibilities. Or I always remember some very funny talk in a taxi cab in Belgrade, where I was riding with my mom and her friend, and we were discussing some books. And at the moment, the taxi cab said, "I envy you so much, ladies." And why? Because if I knew how beautiful it was to read, I would have read all my life. It was for me always a metaphor for, like, maybe somebody is a great pianist but never saw a piano in their life. So in a way, you have to take into account a whole lot of other things, but that is kind of self-understanding, or we don't think about when we just say everybody has a freedom to choose. That's maybe just the basic condition, but not enough. And
I'm sorry, I really have to go, but what you're saying now to me is that's worth another meeting. There's so much that could be said about that and discussed around it. And I apologize. I just have this other commitment I've got to get away to.
Sure.
And so hopefully we'll meet again. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you for coming. It's very interesting to meet you. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, Sifaan.
Finally, I was
person.
I was listening in, but I was traveling, so it was also sort of dark, so I didn't see a point in keeping the camera on. But I'm home now. Like it's what I think 10:30 in the night, So yeah, just wanted to connect with some of the things that was going on. I think Eugene, you have also in some passing mentioned about the distinction between learning and education, and who decides what learning is education. Right? And so it's interesting that when it comes to education as a right, so it's the right to education. It's not the right to learn. It's not the right to school, but it's the right to education. Although some countries interpret that as a school must be compulsory, but let's leave that aside for a moment. I think it's also interesting to look at the environment in which compulsory education was defined in 1948, how that was different maybe in the 60s when it came in the Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights, and then in 1989 when it came into the rights of the child, and then how it has modulated over that period. But before getting into that, I think this conviction that people have that if we don't teach children, they won't learn the things they need, is a story that has been sold to us for generations as far back as we can remember. Like the people who did not or who were not indoctrinated with that belief are long dead, or they are indigenous people or some like marginalized groups who don't have a voice in any of these things. So we have always been brought up on this notion of you need to be taught. And so just like there is this white savior concept, I think there is a teacher savior concept, because most teachers think that, so it's related to paternalism broadly, but then very specifically in that role of the teacher, like I need to educate these unfortunate children who would otherwise not learn these things if we didn't teach them. And it's become an industrial complex also now because there's so much money in this whole thing. And if we were to allow people the freedom to educate themselves through any means, then where is the money going to come from if we are not no longer printing textbooks and study guides and conducting assessments and certifying people? Where is the money going to be? So there's the industrial aspect of it. But I think for Richard's father, the problem was he'd spent his entire career being a teacher savior. And now this book was challenging that identity, and he was, I think, not easily going to accept that, because, I mean, does that mean his entire career was a lie? And I think people who come into teaching as a profession, not everybody necessarily comes in as a savior, but I think if you stay, you very likely will adopt that, because that's a sort of dominant narrative in at least in general education. It may be slightly different in higher education because there's, I think, a little bit more respect for the participants because they are adults. So yeah, there is that challenge that because we are essentially brainwashed to see the world in a certain way, so everybody will tell stories about, oh, I had, you know, these wonderful teachers in school who taught me A, B, C, D things, and we are not even used to thinking about the things that we might have figured out by ourselves or anything, because that's just not valid almost. But so getting back to this sort of contextual evolution, at least from the time of the Russian compulsory schooling, where they wanted to get people who were obedient soldiers, because Germany had just lost, or Russia had just lost the war because their soldiers were not trained well enough. And then other countries in Europe as well as in US started emulating that. And I guess, I mean, maybe at that time there was a sort of need, at least the elites had a need that some people would be fulfilling this role. And so there was the notion of compulsory education was there. Nazi Germany used that very successfully. And then when they were talking about this in 1948, they had a lot of debates on compulsory, but then also as an additional safeguard, had this line that parents have a prior right to choose the kind of education for their children. And this is specifically because in the case of a state being a tyrant, parents should be able to say like, no, I don't want my children to be part of this. I want them to go to some other school. I think at this time, education outside institutional setting was just unheard of, like homeschooling as a thing was unheard of. I mean, homeschooling was a thing that people did because they couldn't get to a school. It wasn't an ideal thing. You didn't really have people who chose to homeschool because they could do a better job. It's just that, you know, the mother might teach the daughter cooking and the father might teach the son how to farm and things like that, but it wasn't the proper education that was expected of the modern society. So you had to receive your education in some kind of a school, and then the parents could choose. Then in the 1960s, the Covenant of Economic, Social, Cultural Rights, that same thing is repeated. So education should be compulsory, at least in the elementary or primary stages, and parents have a right to choose. And I think they expanded on that to talk about it could be because of your religious convictions or your moral conviction, sort of a thing. Then when it came to the Convention of the Rights of the Child, surprisingly, so education is still compulsory, but the article on education no longer talks of the right of parents or guardians to select a different school for their children. So when I initially read it, it sounded like a regression, like why has this right been taken away? But I think it was also that there was, children were sort of property or chattel back in the time of the UDHR. But by the time of the Convention of the Rights of the Child, I think there was a broader understanding of children being right holders in their own rights. And there was an article on the right to be heard, that on anything affecting them, children have a right to be heard, or a right to form an opinion, express that opinion, and for that opinion to be given due consideration considering the age and development of the child. So still fairly paternalistic because you have to think of the age and development of the child, but it was still, I think, quite an advancement. And so the reason that in my reading it is that they no longer had the parents' choice was that, okay, yes, the parent having a choice can be a protection against the tyranny of the state, but what is the protection against the tyranny of the parent? So that's why they said the child's voice has to be heard by the parents, the state, everybody. And a few years later, they issued a general comment on this. And they said that, when we said age, we understand that age is not really a defining factor because, development does not proceed linearly with age. So like, don't worry about the age. And when it comes to the child being capable, the burden is not on the child to prove they are capable. As the state, you have to assume the child is capable of it. And if you can prove otherwise, you can, but the burden is on the state to prove that the child can't form it. So a child with, cerebral palsy or Down syndrome may not be able to form an opinion. And I think the rights of children with special needs or disabilities is a bit more complicated, and I'm not so aware of it, but the position moving away from paternalism and the fact that and I think also this recognition that even a newborn child is capable of forming an opinion, like, if the child is left out in the cold, the child will have an opinion that I don't like this, I'm not happy, I don't feel safe. And then if the child is like seeking for a caregiver, that is also an opinion and that also needs to be fulfilled. So it's the right to be heard doesn't mean that the 3-year-old is choosing whether to study quantum mechanics or not, right? that decision will come whenever the child is ready to make that decision. And so I think in that whole thread, we are seeing that as people think more about what these rights really mean, they are moving away from paternalism. But the school system is built on that paternalism. Teachers are paid to save the children. And of course, if you have to prove that I am a better teacher than that other teacher, we are a better school than that other school, you do it on the basis of paternalism by proving that we are doing more for the children than the others, or this country is doing more for educating their children than the others. So the system has been evolving to become more paternalistic, to become more controlling, to restrict further the rights and freedoms of young people, whereas the definitions of rights have been more evolving towards against paternalism. So I think there's this interesting tension building up, and this is something I hope to talk more about on the 24th. And I'm not sure if the people in the UN really see this problem. I mean, they keep on making statements about doing this and doing more things to make it right affirming. And I don't, at least I've not seen anywhere, because there's very little written at all about paternalism in education. So I don't think this dissonance is seen, but I think challenging that is one of the key things. And then, yeah, there's another aspect also that if a farmer's child, let's say, were to learn from the parents or the family or the community how to be a farmer, and he might be perfectly happy with that life, it's not really good for the economy, because this person is not spending on education. This person is only making enough money to live a simple life, is not buying luxury cars and globe-trotting and computers and smartphones. He's not a consumer. So I think the economy, for the economy to keep growing and for the country to have GDP numbers, it not only needs workers, it needs consumers. So from both of those fronts, there is certain things that people need to learn. And so that whole complex wants to make sure that the education creates workers who are consumers. So, I mean, we are essentially up against the full might of capitalism here.
Sifaan, thank you. Sorry, I'm just a little bit sick, and I'm actually was really afraid that I will lose my voice at some point, but I'm using these pills, not pills, but candies that help me to stay in. Several things. I think your historical analysis are very interesting and important, and I want to encourage you to continue that just because it's very helpful. Another thing, it's super, I really like that approach to see the forces that pushing for that paternalism. That's a very important thing to consider that. In my view, coming from socialist country, being raised in socialist country, I think people sometimes overestimate power of capitalism. It's not capitalism that's doing that. There are some other forces. I lived under socialism, and there was the same, sort to say, shit as capitalism in that sense. And nobody was interested in making money there in that sense. But the system was even more oppressive in terms of education than in another capitalism. So we need to, especially since we have these two models, historical, I think it can be helpful to check some of the hypotheses.
Just to add, China is one of most oppressive educational systems, and it's not a capitalist.
Well, right now it is, but it not used to be not in the past. Right now it's a mixture. But important things that I want also to bring to you, what you started conversation, in my view, very important things. this enlightenment education, and this is what I will develop in my books, coming book, it separates people into categories, which is create this what you call savers syndrome. One of so-called reasonable people who can design and make, can paternalize the other. And the other could be big things. It could be women, it could be people from traditional cultures, not like barbarians, not civilized children, and all of this sphere. And this constantly desire separation of these two types of the people, one with full dignity and another one dignity in the future. Another thing I want to attract this education is was, if you think about that, is the most oppressive things. I've read a very interesting book about history of concentration camps, and you know the concentration camps in 20th century. I'm talking about 20th century when they blossom in like Nazi Germany, Soviet Union, and many other places. It's not only that. The whole idea initially, even concentration camps of extermination, they came to be as extermination only because they initially was considered to be re-education camps. These concentration camps was purpose was to educate, re-educate people, to make them, you know, so also think about boarding schools for Native Americans and Native Aborigine people, and so on and so forth. Again, it's a use of education. Why? Because education makes us people with full dignity. By eliminating all these barbaric, uncivilized things within them, and this kind of oppressiveness of this education, because it is based on the compulsory in broader sense, because could be soft compulsory, not this, but it's based on this idea of coercion. It's based on the not having dignity, not recognizing dignity in other people, or children who are considered to be barbaric, stupid, ignorant, and so on and so forth. That's why you cannot trust their decision. That's why their current being, has to be eliminated. Or one of my colleagues from actually also a person from originally from Soviet Union, but now in the United States, Alexander Sidorkin, he said we're treating children as half being, because the only important things will be only in the future. Everything what's going on now is preparation for the future. That's why what's now happening with them, all their desires, or it's kind of nonsense. At best, they can be exploited to propel them to the future. And otherwise, you have to ignore and suppress it, but even suppress that. All this playing games or whatever, all their interest in here and now, not important. What's important is kind of future. And in the name of the future, we can suppress what's going on now. And later, you will be thankful to us. That's another very important paternalistic things, that later you will be thankful to us. Yeah, you might cry, disagree with her now, but in the future, you will be thankful to us. Another thing, this paternalism is actually, it's a legal term in ancient Rome, and it's coming from the word not parents, but for father. It's not maternalism. It's only a father who can make decisions on behalf of the limit the freedom for the good of the children, not mother. Mother cannot do it. It's only father. But it's kind of interesting, just historical aspect, talking about history of that. I'm just where it was coming from. And yes, it's paternalism is the basis right now. What's interesting is also to consider forces, which is you start doing that, and I really like that what you're doing. I think you should write more about that. That not only historical forces that put it, support paternalism, but also historical new forces that undermines it. And I think they're also growing, in my view. And what you said, I agree with you, they start growing. And that it is interesting to consider why they start growing. One part of course, the growing them from the kind of not stabilizing society, but part of that it is, but in becoming more and more unpredictable. And that's why the old kind of forces do not work. Another thing, did you hear Sugatra Mitra? He's Indian educator from India.
Yeah, I know the hole in the wall story.
Yeah, but I'm more referring not that one, but his speech about school, what is called school in the cloud. Anna, is it school in the cloud?
Yeah.
Yeah. When he talks about British Empire, in my view, he's too much focused on British Empire, although it could be some part of that can be true. But creating these human mechanisms, society that an economy especially consisting of human mechanism that people are mutually replaceable, and you can just make almost like a Lego out of them to make it work. And schools are doing perfectly. They're creating these smart machines out of humans. I actually make an argument that the smart machine was as humans, putting them in that position of the smart machine.
Argument is that the British Empire needed to govern huge and far away countries and people, and they needed to create this government without computers, but with humans. So they needed to have their administration all around, and the schooling was to make these people who will be governing all in the uniform way through the British rule.
Yeah.
That's his
So,
main.
but I think Sifaan heard that speech, right? You heard that, yeah. So we don't need to. We know what you're talking about. The Sugatra Mitra is talking about, but what's happening is right now. This is my kind of suspicion or claim, observation, whatever. That the need for this mutual replaceability still there, but it's getting less and less there. What's becoming more important is this kind of creativity and stuff like that. Like we have, for example, artificial intelligence. So the biggest question becomes how to prompt it, how creatively and efficiently prompt it. Rather than which is and sometimes uniqueness become important, creativity become important. Again, I'm not trying to overstate that's their own thing. At the same time, so we need like economy based on the people who deliver pizza or deliver Amazon goods and stuff like that. But that trend is important in my view, which is also undermining this mechanistic kind of assembly line of the people as nuts and bolts of this machinery, kind of huge machinery. So I think it's very interesting to look at this from both historical things of that and functional, like what's forces going on for the school and what's conventional school and what forces going against that. In terms of the rights, if you, because you're interested in the rights, think about that. It's very interesting for me. We can say there is no such a right for the food. It's kind of interesting, important right? But there's no such thing as compulsory feeding. That right for compulsory feeding. And consider not somebody's right, but it's your right to be compulsory fed. Which is very interesting. Like, why it's not there? Why is it for food it's not like that, but for education it's like that? Okay. And because all the rights are based on the desires of the people, on recognizing that this realization is essential, what you have already, and society has obligation to facilitate your desires. With the case of education, it's not considered to be a desire of the person, but it's considered to be that person doesn't have that desire, essentially. But the society has need for that. But still, it's not recognition that it's not the right of the society to enforce on you. It's your right. This is, to me, it's such a strange, bizarre thing going on there. And I think articulation of that bizarreness can help. Because I don't think people kind of couldn't kind of see the bizarreness of that. Of that claim include like my right is to be, my right is somebody can oppress me and for my own good. By the way, I tried to look at all the rights. I couldn't find similar whatsoever. There's no other, any other right is like that. Like, for example, even right for life, they didn't spell out that there is compulsory, there is a right to compulsory feeding you. There is no such thing in the human rights, right? Although in some societies, they think, in some culture, they feel it must be there, but it's not there.
To me, always the word right implies that it's a person's decision and nobody else's decision. If it's a right,
No,
anything
it's not decision. It's a desire. Person desire for something, and the person has, first of all, that desire is recognized,
right,
and it's considered to be necessary. And the claim is, when it's put as a right, that
Right.
somebody has to, first of all, you have legitimacy of that desire, and somebody has to facilitate that desire to you. That's what rights to me means. And with the case of the rights for as compulsory education, it's violation of that.
Mhm. If just the right of education, I could understand that. It should be a basic human right, but
Right.
compulsory goes against it. Because first of all, who defines, yes, the education, and second, who has a right to impose education on somebody who doesn't want it?
And this is for me the crux of the things what Anna you just said, because you know the people said, okay, even what you just decide hear that in discussion, Sifaan, I think you joined at the time you could hear that. Like Kelly was talking about her children, and she said, you know, initially they play games, but then they start doing academic education. So in a way, you only can be justified if at the end of the day you yourself voluntarily will do what society wants you to do. And in my view, again, this is, in my view, colonization, that part of the, our minds colonized. By the way, I'm not putting a finger on the Kelly. I'm constantly finding this colonization in my mind that I'm trying to clean, like many things that, as you mentioned that, Sifaan, that it's how much is hegemony. It's the, like, it's in the air. You was born with all this, I don't know about you, but I was born with almost like all this idea. I were raised with all these ideas about compulsory education and how much, of course, it's obvious that ignorant people cannot make a good decision about their own life. That's why they're ignorant. I think there is such thing as non-ignorant people.
Right. We are all ignorant of something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And as Socrates was saying, the most part of the education, that is in his definition of education, was to figure out the boundary of the ignorance, rather than elimination of the ignorance, rather than thinking that something like that can be achievable or even desirable to achieve, to eliminate the ignorance.
Right.
Just thinking about food and being force-fed versus education. So I think there's maybe few reasons for this difference maybe. So one is that nobody worries that people will not see the need to eat. If you don't eat, you will feel hungry, you will want to eat. But if you are, like you say, ignorant, you may be ignorant of the need for education and you may not receive any education. So I think this has a bit of a complexity with what you said right at the start about this paternalism, sort of biological aspect of it. So when it comes to food, yes, parents or caregivers have to provide food for a newborn, because this is all mammals, I think, are born needing some level of feeding, few months or whatever it is until they wean. But then many of them will figure out how to hunt fairly soon. But with the human system, we are dependent for a much longer time. And in a way, in the same way, because we're social animals, we are dependent on each other for education. Oh, but much of our learning happens socially. So, even as adults, we look at what other people do, we imitate them in terms of advertising. So there is a role that other people play in that social interaction. It's just that with adults, we don't necessarily see it in that paternalistic, coercive, almost controlling every step of the way angle of things. But then in terms of this fear of, will people learn the things they need to learn, is there for education, and it's not there for food. And then there is another aspect that, as far as my nutrition needs are concerned, generally, okay, let's say I knew what was healthy for me to eat, there is no value in me overeating. There is no value in me saying, Eugene only had 200 grams of meat, but I had 500 grams of meat. Once I'm satiated, until I'm hungry again, I don't need to eat. But education is not like that, because education impacts on the kind of work we do, the kind of prestige or status we have. It impacts many things. So, like when my father was studying, it was sufficient for him to complete 11 years of school, and he could get a job that provided him an income to maintain a family. By the time I was in school, that 11 years were not sufficient to have a decent life. Now it's unthinkable that anybody with just 11 years of schooling would have. And the reason for this is that the competition for jobs has got intensified. There's an expectation that because education is available, people should do it more. So, now you have more and more people who would like do a degree, then maybe go on to a master's, and then only enter the workforce by the late 20s or something. So there is a competition element to education, which we don't have in food. And I think because of that competition element, going back to the parents or guardians' role in providing, so the guardian's role in keeping the child safe, healthcare, food, nutrition, is not really so subject to that competition environment. But then we live in society where there is this competitive environment when it comes to education. So what is the role of the parent in supporting the child's right to education is met? Because, I mean, if we are going to support the child's right to food and healthcare, we presumably also have a role in supporting their right to education. But what is that supportive role going to look like when it interfaces with that competitive aspect? So we cannot maybe totally escape from paternalism, in the sense that I mean, just like, for example, the duty to provide healthcare and nutrition. So there is some things we may have to do, but how do we balance that or reconcile that with not making decisions that they could make or could learn to make if we didn't keep taking away the opportunities. So like, when helicopter parents step in and solve their children's problems for them, then they are denying the children the ability to learn how to solve that problem themselves. But is it better to solve the problem now, or is it better to hold back and let children learn how to figure that out themselves? How do we make a decision like that?
My response to that, which is, this is excellent question that you bring, actually very good issues, tough ones, and it's, in my view, we should tackle tough ones rather than focus on spreading new something that rather than becoming true believers. Let me put that way. So my answer to that, I think that paternalism is legitimate, first of all. The problem is, there are several problems. What this paternalism is for, and the second one is educational paternalism in specific. Because educational paternalism is different from other paternalism. As you start talking about like paternalism about food, for example, versus paternalism about education. In my view, I don't know if you read my article about that, but I'm saying that learning is different from education because education is exactly making a judgment by the person that the learning is good. And by the way, just for you, since you're coming from culture when it's recognized, I think there's too much focus only on learning. There is another things like I say, insight, revelation, change of paradigm, whatever, which is strangely enough in so-called Western culture dropped because it's existed everywhere, recognition of this, but somehow it's dropped. It's only focus become on learning, as if there is no other ways of transformation of your subjectivity that can come from. But anyway, forget about that part. In my view, these things, so when paternalism happens, we need to recognize that it's not learning. It's not, I'm sorry, it's not education. When somebody, for example, recruit me from eating poisonous mushrooms, let's say, by the way, it's not necessarily because I'm a child, but even if I'm an adult, doesn't matter, because they're poisonous. I highly appreciate that, but it may be nothing to do with my education. And they should be separated that. And there's nothing wrong about that somebody prioritize my survival above my education, rather than me trying to experiment with these mushrooms and see, I might not survive that experimentation. And that somebody can see that and say, you know what, Eugene, do not do education. Your education is out right now. Your survival is in, your education is out. And that's beautiful in my view. There's nothing wrong with that. And this type of paternalism, that sometimes education is not the most important thing. And sometimes it's okay to say, you know what, stop education, start surviving. And that's fine. In my view, the problem is with educational paternalism is it kills, when it starts using that, it's exactly kills education. You can do anything else, but not education. Like, for example, you can say, you know, for your well-being, you need to study how to become a warrior, for example, or a peasant or engineers. Fine, but that's, by doing that, it's paternalism. But that paternalism itself is not educational. Because in education, it's exactly consideration what's good for me, what's not good for me. Not somebody decides that it's good for me. But when I'm deciding that it's good for me or it's not good for me. By the way, my mind can change it later. And later I might change whether or not something was educational and now I think it's not educational, and vice versa. Something that was non-educational for me, suddenly I say, no, that's actually that experience was educational for me. And so, that's one part. Another part, it's about paternalism in general. And a part of that, I think, right now, it's the primary focus on this paternalism. It's defensive. It's about worst case scenario. It's about war. I worry about you. That's why I'm paternalize you. I think it's dangerous. That's why either you should do that, or you must do that, or must not do that. So it is very much coming from defensiveness and from survival and from this worries about this, which is, I'm not saying that it's wrong. My point is, it's too totalizing. There is other type of paternalism can think about something else. Like, for example, exactly promoting your self-actualization, providing conditions for that. And that's also can be paternalistic, but it's focusing on that side of that. And this side of that, for some strange reason, is not well emphasized, or that other part of paternalism, which is important, not only survival, but it's about blossoming. Paternalism that promoting blossoming and concerns about blossoming rather than concerns only about survival. Like about what you, Sifaan, talk about dignity. Paternalism for dignity, not paternalism just for
I don't know
survival.
whether at that point you can call it paternalism anymore, because I think that you have to think of a relationship between people in terms of how they see each other's dignity. And if you see the dignity in a person, your child or a student, I don't think then your relationship is paternalistic. You still can have a lot of to offer and think that you know a lot what's good or not good, but you're giving dignity and possibility to the other as an equal to you.
No, I disagree with you. And I can give you example, which is my favorite example coming from my childhood, which is, I think, very paternalistic, but it was focusing exactly on what I'm talking about now. I was in with my parents, I think I was 5, a long time ago. I was with my parents in, now it's independent state, but it used to be part of Soviet Union. It was Latvia, and specifically it was capital of that, Riga. By the way, highly recommend everybody to visit that place. My childhood, wow, about this place. Anyway, there was a lot of fish there because it's on the Baltic Sea, and so we were in the restaurant, and my parents ordered smoked fish, and they suggested me to try that. And when I saw that, it's look fishy, that smoked fish. I don't know if you just if you like smoked fish. Oh, you live in Estonia. Okay, great. That you understand what I'm talking about. So it's a great. So it's look fishy, smelled fishy. It's by the way, it was what's considered hot smoked fish, not cold. So it's like. And so I didn't want to try. And so at the same time, I love and still I'm liking that dark chocolate candies. And my parents told me, if you we can give you this candy if you try that. If you decided not to finish that, that's fine. But you can try that fish and you will get the candy. If you don't decide not to try that, that's fine. In this case, you just will order something else, but you will not get this candy. I was like, boom, 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 boom. And but like, okay, I just like close my nose and bite that and then get my candy and that will be over. I tried that and I love that fish. So for me, I ate it and I got candy, which is I also like, and said, can we order another fish? And can I get candy for that? And my parents say, absolutely not. You can eat another fish, but no, forget about another candy for that. But in my view, this is, if you think about almost like a metaphor, a very good case. for this paternalism, for it's not about safety. My parents didn't care about safety of me, right? So it was about like enriching my life by trying that, and they respect that maybe I don't really like that thing, that fish. Maybe it's true, but at least they encouraged me to try. And by the way, that encouragement was extremely paternalistic. How they did this, by the way, they did it not through the coercion of the violence or punishment, whatever.
Manipulation.
They bribed me. Let's be honest what they did. They bribed me, but they bribed me not in order that I eat fish, but to try that, to see, to expand, to expose my to the new tastes and to see whether or not I like it or not. I would say that this is paternalism, and it's paternalism of the coming from idea of enrichment, idea of my exactly self-actualization, of exposure to the new experiences, not for the sake that I was become eater of the smoked fish, no, but just to see whether or not I like it or not, to overcome my aversion of that, which is kind of understandable. If it's your first experience with that, it's not the best aesthetically best looking food. So that type of paternalism, I
Okay,
said, it's
okay.
happened. It's happened there. And in my view, it's not culturally, you see, when you think, oh, that doesn't exist, it exists. And in my view, it's
No, I didn't say
increasingly
that, but
important to recognize that.
no.
That's another type of
You didn't
paternalism.
understand what I said because they bribe you, but they recognize your dignity. There was
What
paternalism.
I'm
and this
talking
is the,
about, but I was not very
boundary.
well. I was not very well.
Let's translate that into higher education. And you can say, we tell the students, you can use it or not use it. If you want to use it, you will get grades, and it will be, you will have to behave this and this and that way, but it's up to you. You don't want to, fine, you will not get grades, you will not get a diploma.
No. You must do that. No. It's not like that. First of all, in order to use grades is it's not candies. Grades is something
No,
else.
but no, you get a diploma. That's the candy, and you can get a better future for yourself. That's
Diploma is not candy. No, I disagree with you. Diploma is not candy. It's actually gatekeeping. It's actually coming from. It's not giving you. It's part of this is very it's the distraction of that. It's actually opening the gate for you, but it's not. It's based on the things that you're not getting there otherwise. It's precluding you. It's already based on violence, keeping you away. You only can get it. So for example, the diploma. You may be capable of doing whatever this diploma is saying, and but you don't have diploma and you're not able to do it, and vice versa. You might not able to do things. You have diploma, you can do it. You can get it. So diploma it's a very perversion of things. It's not candy.
yeah. Okay, I understand.
Just to add something to that example, I mean, so our son is now 8.5, and we had a very firm conviction that we don't want to use any sort of punishment or any sort of rewards as parents, and so we have a commitment to use restorative practices for any issues, and that is also what we apply in the school. So we have a general approach or value maybe of trying different things, and as part of that we encourage him also to try and see, because I mean, like, if you don't try it, how do you know you don't like it? But and one of the things is, so we wouldn't offer any sort of candy or incentive for trying, just as much as if Eugene came to visit me in Sri Lanka and I showed him some Sri Lankan food and said, why don't you try this? And if he was reluctant, I would not offer him candy or any sort of things in order to incentivize him to try, because that would be, I think, quite undignified among adults. And if it's undignified among adults, then And if children are full human beings, then it also must be undignified to do it to a child. So I believe we're capable of generally encouraging to try out things without having to have that incentive. And there are some situations where he might say like, no, I don't want to try it. I don't like how it looks. I don't like how it smells. I don't want to try the taste. And in that sort of situation, I think what we would do most of the time and what we would try to do all of the time is to respect that opinion. And if he says he doesn't want to have something, and if we are capable of giving him some other option, we have the money, we have the time, things like that, then we would do that. If we are rushing to catch a plane or something like that, then maybe we're not able to provide other options, and there could be some sort of extreme things like that. But then we still owe it to explain that circumstance to him, and I think then he understands, because those are exceptions. But if we are able to provide, we do. So I think there is a certain level of desire to propagate our values. So since we like trying different things, we would encourage people around us to do that. We obviously encourage our child to do that because we have more contact with him. And I see that as, in a way, part of our freedom of expression as well. But because we do have power in this relationship, I mean, even if we don't use the power to, I don't know, punish or hurt or withhold privileges, that possibility is always in there. So I think we have to be mindful of what level of expectation we convey when we offer something or request something or suggest something. But yeah, what I was sort of elaborating on was that it would have been very different if the candy wasn't offered at all. And I also had a question for something Eugene said earlier, that whether some learning is education or not is that the person should decide, and you might decide, something that you decide is education, you might later change your mind and say it wasn't, or something you decided now that wasn't education, you might decide later that it was. But is it important that the person recognizes it or evaluates it for being educational or not? I mean, does that person actually need to ponder and answer that question at all?
No, good questions. In my view, first of all, part of the education is recognizing that learning indeed happened, or transformation happened, and to assess the values on that. If it's not, by the way, that's the issue is education is not the highest value in my view in the life. There are many. Sometimes it can be, sometimes it cannot be, and sometimes education can be an even dangerous thing. As we talk about this poisonous mushrooms. So I'm not trying to totalize education like many educators do, and especially it's an Enlightenment tradition that thinking that education is the most important thing in the life. No, it's like anything else. Sometimes it can be very important, sometimes important but not very, and sometimes it can be neutral, and sometimes it can be dangerous, pretty dangerous things. So I don't try to. Yes, but for me, education, it is about making judgment about either things that happen to you and recognize that it's, first of all, that it's happened. Or there is another part of education that important to talk about. In that paper, I don't think I talk about that. I start talking about later. It's also you can design experiences, like you want to design learning for yourself. You want to design transformation of yourself. Like, for example, you, like Anna thinks, I want to learn how to play piano. So, which means I know that I don't know, or I'm not able to play piano, whatever it means for you. And I want to transform myself to be able to do that. Again, judge as what you mean by that. And I think as it is now, I might again change my mind. I think it is good for me. So it's also kind of past or present oriented education, but it could be future oriented for yourself as well. But it's for yourself, and it's constantly that it is in that judgment what's good or what's not. By the way, you that's very interesting things because it's almost everybody agree with me. It just what the disagreement has happened. Who decides that? Who make that judgment? In conventional way, it's that designers of education make judgment what's good, what's not good. And it's just what I'm doing that. I agree that it's education and judgment. I just disagree that it's outside of the person who is involved in that. I'm just returning back to the agency of the person who is involved in the transformation of their subjectivities, skills, knowledge, whatever we can talk about. Like whether or not learning how to play games, video games, is it good for you or not good for you? Again, society, right now it's society, or what does mean society? It's this, this high priests of this educational high priest that making the decision what's good for you, what's not good for you. And I'm just returning what high priests have back to the what they, in my view, hijacked from the educatees. That it's their that's what defines education in my view. And they just robbing everyone by doing that from education. They just that's why in a way they promoting non-education. They're robbing, they're not allowing education to happen. And it's a double steal. One steal, they take it from you, and the second, they claim that robbing itself is education, which is it's not. And that's for me.
Sorry, I didn't catch the word. They claim that what is education?
They in a way they rob you twice. As educatee, one thing they're robbing because they make decision for you what's good for you, what's not, because that's education. That second one, they masking. They say complying with our goals is education, but it's not.
So the last bit, what without walls?
Complying with our decision what's good education is education, but it's not.
Yeah. And in this case, they're robbing you twice. They rob you because they not allow you to participate in education. And second, they tell you that what's education, which is not really education.
You're right.
You think you're becoming educated, but you're not.
If I come as a student and say, what do I need to, how can I decide whether it's good for me or not? If you're saying you should decide what's good for education for you, and nobody else will decide that, and you as a student or a person say, well, but on what basis? You're the expert. How should I know?
It's like, let me give, I had on this New Year party with my friends from former Soviet Union. And one adult, a child of my friend who is adult, she's like 30. And she, for professional reasons, she was attending some school. And I asked her, are you still in that school? And she said, oh, thanks God, it's not. I'm done with education and hopefully never do it again. You know, for me, what's really how to touched me or disturbed me, that she thinks that what she was doing was education, while it was not. And that's why she created such an aversion to education. And they robbed her from two things at once. That's what I started thinking. One thing, they robbed her from engaging in genuine education. In another one, for not recognizing what education is about. And And that's why what she developed aversion is not to education, but this coercion and robbing her from education.
Yeah, being put in such a position, yeah. Mhm.
I would like to add to something that Anna said. So, if I trying to think of a good example, but okay, let's say I'm trying to decide what sort of design I want for my facial hair. Now, it's my right to decide how I want to have. Do I want to be clean shaven? Do I want the mustache? Do I want long beard? What is it? But in this process, I could reach out to other people, my wife or my friends, and know, what do you think of this? What do you think of my look? And what do you think about if I were to shave? And they could give their opinions. I think I have the freedom to ask that opinion, and they can give their opinion. Sometimes they might give the opinion without me soliciting it, in which case I might accept it or I might reject it. And I could ask many people about this. I could choose to give more weight to the opinion of somebody who's an expert in fashion. I could choose to give more weight to the opinion of somebody who tells me what I want to hear, which is maybe not the same as what the expert says, but I can talk to people who I trust. I might be wrong in my judgment, but I can talk to people and I can use their inputs for that. So in the same sense, I think a student can ask the professor, can ask the other students, can ask alumni, can ask prospective employers, and considering all those things, make a decision, because whatever they decide, unless this person is going to become a hermit and pursue self-enlightenment or something like that, probably this education is also going to be used in a social context. If I'm learning to become a barista, then I will be making coffee for other people, and it matters how they see my work. So,
Yeah.
I think being open to the question and to give the feedback that is requested from us to the best of our ability and let them deal with it any which way is one perspective. There is, I think, also a sort of worrying issue of echo chambers and, let's say neo-Nazis reinforcing each other's beliefs, or Islamic fundamentalists reinforcing each other's beliefs, and what happens then. And this is one thing I like about the rights-based approach. You said the first point is about the individual's development, and the second thing is about the respect for human rights of all people. So I can choose to do whatever thing I want to do as long as it does not infringe on the rights of other people. And sometimes it's not so black or white. It's a bit tricky to decide that, but at least that safeguard is built into that human rights kind of thing. So, I mean, in a way, if I want to be, if Amish people are happy to live their lifestyle and go about in horse and buggies and have no electricity, it's not hurting anybody else, so let them be.
Absolutely, Ian. I'm nothing against laws that providing limits to education. There is nothing wrong about that. And education also is problematic things. Like, for example, is it like some people think it's real, it's not hypothetical. Think about want to educate themselves about how more effectively heal other people, and what's technical to use that. By the way, this on society see depends on the many contexts, whether or not it's good or not good. Like, for example, if it's considered to be soldiers or police or some other situation, they might say it's good. Learning how to kill people more effective way is good. But if it's like terrorism or whatever, they will decide the terrorism and so on and so forth like that, or to participate in criminal activities, which is illegal and whatever, that will be considered bad things. But again, you see, and certain things are very problematic, like terrorists for once, freedom fighters for another. There is a big debates could be about that in society, and there could be laws against certain type of education, like for example, for civilians to participate in learning how to build like nuclear weapon or weapons of mass destruction could be prohibited and even criminal, and spreading and teaching about that. But again, in my view, this is a great question, and what's important is to demystify education, not to make it, oh, this is education, it's a sacred things, which is very good all the time. More education, the better. No, it's not true. By the way, why they were saying before? Because they're controlling what education is about. That's why they were saying that, because it's by saying that, they're in control to say what's good, what's not good.
The question is, if you're thinking on that level of the society, and I think, Sifaan, you mentioned it before, like, or somebody else in our conversation, where will the money come from? And that means that you have to create a demonopolization of education in a way that if you say that there is a right of the child or right of people on education, that means everybody has a right to get money for that education too, and regardless of how they define education, except if it's not criminally prohibited in certain. And that means you cannot, as a state, have a monopoly on the educational approach and educational paths of other people or schools. Yeah.
And then this, by the way, means that religious education could be also supported by public money. And by the way, it's very easy to decide many of those things, because part of this whole controversies about public education money coming from paternalism. And it has to be replaced, paternalism has to be replaced by the law. If something is illegal in the society that considered to be legal, and this money should be not used for promoting education in that direction. That's it. If something is legal, it can be. It doesn't matter. It's a religion, or you're creating a church of the flat earth.
Everybody's paying taxes.
It means that if you want to have school and you're not forcing people to be in your school, that's fine. Also, issue even forcing. If students want to be forced, I don't see any problem with that. What I called self-paternalism. And I faced with students, I kind of fully recognize it was, fortunately, our conversation was recorded with one of my students in the university who, it was very, I don't know if you read the paper that I wrote about that, but it was a very funny situation in one of my classes. The way how class emerged in organization of the class, it was at the beginning, one student, or me, it was in the rotation, was responsible for leading the class, initially at the beginning. Later it will disappear. And the class should start with asking a question, how are you doing? Which taking that seriously question, like what's going on in your life? Whatever you want to share in the circle, before we focused on what we want to study in this class, which is decided by the students, not by me. So it was the last day of the class, and for that class, I was in charge of asking everybody how are you doing? And one student started telling about kind of, this is end of the semester, and she started saying how much she felt oppressed by all these papers that she needs to write for different classes or exams to take, including our class, which we didn't have exam, but it was a project that she has to do, and ask her why. And in my class, the students can choose different regimes, pedagogical regimes. And she chose pedagogical regime that I decide the projects and give grades for if they like it, if the project is good or not. The way how we decide the project is good or not, it's more complicated. I'm not going to go there. But this is what, and she said, that's, sorry, pardon my, this is, I'm quoting, your fucking final project, she said, or main learning project, she said. And I said, why are you saying that it's fighting? You could choose another pedagogical regime in which you will design everything by yourself. And if you thought that you don't want to have this main learning project, you would not have it. Why you choose this? You would do, by choosing that, does it mean that you're not trusting your own judgment? I asked her. And she initially said yes. And then she thought for a moment and said, no. Think about that, she said. I choose that regime because I needed that. And I recognize that I needed that. Because, you know, this class is the most important class for the whole, she was senior, that was her last semester, for the whole university, all classes that I had. But and the project that I'm doing, it's the own project that I wanted to do it for all my 4 years, which is, by the way, I still remember what she was doing because it was like 5 years ago. She was doing, because you will be maybe interested even, Sifaan, she was doing a school prison pipeline, how much school leads to prison. But she said, if you're not forcing me to do it, I will shift my efforts and time to other classes that will punish me if I'm not doing it. And you make, by forcing me to do, I'm doing exactly what I want to do. What's most important for me. But for that, you need to force me. And I know that you don't like to force people, but it's your job. You're my teacher. And I'm very happy to do things in class. But at the same time, I will bitch about that. And I'll bitch about you. And you have to tolerate, it's part of your profession. And I really, really like that. And unfortunately, it was recorded because we recorded all our classes for people who might miss them and whatever. We decided to record the class. And I was like, transcribe that. And I thought it's beautiful. And for this time, I realized about this phenomenon of self-paternalism. When you decided that somebody else has to force you to do things, but it's very conditional, unlike other paternalism. It's conditional. It's only when she feels I'm forcing her to do what she wants to do. If I kind of deviate from that, she will say, goodbye, Eugene. And that's part of her right to do that. That's why I don't like this notion of self-directed education. Because, not because I don't like self-directed, but because there is much more than that exists. When people, for example, auto-paternalism for me, is a part of self-education. Because she's still in charge of her own education. Even when she said, I'm surrendering my rights and my freedom to do that to you, but overall, I'm serving her, not she's serving me, not my paternalism. It's her self-paternalism, and it's on her conditions. And she constantly making educational judgment. Is it helpful for her? Not helpful.
Mhm.
So one of the, I think, things with democratic education is that it often looks different to conventional education because a lot of the structures in conventional education is coerced. So the fact that the system has designed the syllabus, has given the textbooks, has defined the assessment standards, the timetables, people sitting in rows, maybe listening to the teacher droning on. And then a lot of times in democratic schools, it doesn't look like that. But if like say, in our school right now, some parts of the schedule are pretty much indefinite. They can change if there's a request. Some parts of the schedule are fixed for a month and some parts of the schedule change every week. But somebody could say, this process is just too stressful. I don't want to wait till Sunday night to see what my schedule is for the week. I want the long-term stability of having established schedule. Or I don't like figuring out all these things for myself. I just want somebody to tell me. And like a, sort of in a minor example of this, when I think I was still struggling to find the boundaries between progressive and democratic. So my son came and asked me some question, and I think I tried to ask some questions to help him find the answer. And he said, I don't want you to ask me questions. I want you to tell me the answer to the question I'm asking. And when he phrased it like that, I realized, okay, if he wants to figure it out for himself, he'll do it. If he wants help to figure it out for himself, he'll ask for that help. Right now, he's asking for help for a specific answer, so I should give that specific answer if I know it. So likewise, if a child were to say that for this thing or for these things, I want to be taught, I want somebody else to be responsible for this because I don't want to take on the responsibility. It's overwhelming for me, whatever it is. I think they have as much right to say those things. And if we are capable of providing that, then we should. So there's nothing. I mean, the problem with the things in conventional education is not so much the pedagogical nature of it, but the fact that it's imposed on people without giving them a choice. If they were to say that this pedagogical method is what works for me, or I don't want the freedom that comes with this thing because it's overwhelming for me. I mean, if I were to go to the supermarket to buy ketchup and there's one brand of ketchup, I'll buy the ketchup and come. If I go to the supermarket and there's 50 types of ketchup, it's quite frustrating to try to decide which one to buy. Sometimes having too much choice is unhelpful. So the issue is more about whether the consent or the dignity or the oppression is there or not, and not so much the specific approach. So just like in Eugene's case, I don't want to define the project for myself. I don't want to define the timelines. I want you to give me that structure, and then I'll work. So I think it's she's right. She has the right to do that, and then because you are being paid to be an educator, you have an obligation to do that. I mean. Because what she was asking for was a reasonable expectation of an educator. I mean, if she asked you to do some Russian folk dance while she was presenting a paper, something that may not be a reasonable expectation.
And in my view, I'm become teacher not because I'm assigned, but I'm really become a teacher when students say, we need your help. And this is, and the help can be on different levels. One, including one to force to study what they want to study. That could be, or including help exactly to provide. Like one thing that I want to tell you that we have this students select what to study, and this list is growing mostly because the students add new things to that previous students didn't think about. And sometimes we bringing new topics because we thought it's very interesting topic. It's new topic in the society and we're adding them. But one options is added by my former students, and now it's there. In some classes it's not there. It's Eugene decide. And so they give me this exactly because, by the way, there is another interesting thing. It's not only because they exhausted sometimes it could be like that. But sometimes it's because they really want to know what I would see as interesting to study for them. You see that kind of almost like paternalism in this case. What I think is good for them. But in one class, I did almost like an experiment. I told them, okay, they choose me, and I said the topic will be this and this, and okay, and there is silence after that, and then one student say why. I said, what do you mean why? Because I said so. You asked me to what to choose, and I chose that. And they said, no, it's impossible. I said, why? Well, because we know why you think it's good for us to study. I said, well, because you asked me to choose, I choose. And they said, no, not in our class. If you're not going to tell us, we will withdraw that and we will decide without you. Because in our class, you have to explain, because it's tradition to explain why is it good. Why this topic is good to study in general and in this time in particular. That's usually kind of two things. So I was like thinking that I cannot hijack in a way their freedom of education, or actually their education. I have to explain to why I think it is good in general and this time in particular to study. And I was very happy that I couldn't anymore like in another classes, it's not even question why to study that because teacher decided. And in this class, even when they choose to do that, even they gave me this, delegate me that, I cannot go anymore like that. I just cannot say it just because, or because you gave me that power. It's not enough anymore. I have to justify that. And that was very, very interesting phenomena. And interesting test, almost like of how much this power issue was resolved, at least in limited way. Some I need to go. Okay.
I have to go, yes. I have to do several things and then I have to spend time with my granddaughter after that.
Well, it was Sifaan pleasure again meeting with you, and thanks a lot for inviting for this event. I will try to be there on 24th, right? It's
Yes.
Mhm.
And I remember what I don't know. I checked the time it is, what the time it is in our time, because it's in your time, right? You put the time in Sri Lanka time, right?
If I've invited you to the Facebook event, you should see it in your time zone. So I am having two events. So one is around lunchtime here, which is like early morning in Europe, late night in like Australia. So it's like for Asia Pacific mainly, and then also okay for Europe, Africa. And then the other one is in the evening in Europe time, which means it's sort of morning in the US. So probably the second event is what will work for
Yeah,
you.
yeah. I thought it was like almost 1:30 p.m. or something like that, but I'll check it again. Thanks.
Yeah, it would be something like that. Yeah, because for me that session is because you're on Eastern time, right?
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. Because for me it's 11 p.m. to midnight 30. So yeah, it should be around I don't know 12:30, 1:30, something like that in the US.
Mhm.
Okay, good. Excellent. Okay, well, see you then. And
you.
All
bye.
right. All
Bye.
right. Thank
Very
you.
good to
Bye-bye.
see you after so long time.
Yes. Nice to see you out here.
Thank you.
Bye.